Okay, welcome back. We're on page 97 talking about the kickoff meeting. I'm telling you a story now that happened to me. And quite frankly, I don't really remember this, which is kind of the point of the story. But we had a kickoff meeting and somebody raised their hand and said, well, I think we need to have voice recognition added to this project. And supposedly, although I don't remember this, supposedly I laughed and said, yeah, right. And so I blew it off. And then when the project was nearing completion, the same guy came and said, so where's this voice recognition feature? And I went, what voice recognition feature? What are you talking about? He goes, yeah, I remember I asked you to add this feature. And I went, you did? We had to go back through the meetings, and sure enough, he did. And I didn't take it seriously. And I didn't write it down. And I didn't assign it to anyone, and therefore it didn't happen. Okay, just telling you. Keeping good notes, particularly things that are going to require action. Super important. Okay, so let's continue. On page 98, they talk about the project planning phase now. Okay, so the project planning phase is where you're going to be doing these kinds of things. Now, right off the bat, do you remember me saying that the monitoring and controlling doesn't actually is not a waterfall issue? It's the one that kind of transcends them all. So here's the initiating piece. We just talked about the planning piece. So we have some sort of execution. So I'm going to go zip on down here to the planning part. And planning part includes parts of the monitoring and controlling. So this is what you're going to probably produce in one of these projects. The planning is going to produce this kind of thing. All right. So almost every one of the 10 knowledge areas has some sort of planning, because you don't just jump into everything. You have to have a plan for something, right? Okay. So let's talk about some of the key outputs from the planning part. Remember, this case study is about producing a web page. Hang on just a second. I got a squeaky little kitty over here. Yeah, this is the noise you heard squeaking. All right. Okay, so some of the key outputs you're going to have with planning, depending on which one of the 10 phases you're in, is basically a team contract. So on page 101, they have an example of what a team contract is all about. This basically is like a conduct, team building exercise. All team members are going to do this and they're going to do that, and it's all positive. It's not wrath of God, strike them down if they do bad, but more like a team building kind of rah thing. So a team contract. You're also going to produce the scope statement. So the scope basically says, here's what it is we're going to do, and quite frankly, perhaps here's what we're not going to do. Now, for example, one of the things I just mentioned was a story about, somebody asking for a feature that I didn't approve, didn't even remember it, to tell you the truth. It would have made better sense if we had part of the scope statement, not only the things that it is going to do, but also document the things that it is not going to do. It would have been very cool to say that it is not going to do this, and this. Okay, cool. So the scope statement. So the scope statement is table 3-9, starting on page 102 and going to 104. And one of the things that's kind of cool is that it includes what's called the success criteria. So during this period right here of planning, I'm trying to determine what it is that's going to say that we achieved our goal. Our goal is to increase sales by 20%. So, how do I determine whether I was successful or not? Well, I need to put measures in place that come up with, did I increase sales by 20% or not? One of the other key outputs you're probably going to have in the planning is these work breakdown structures. Now, that sounds kind of weird because I'm looking at work breakdown structures while I'm talking to you, but during the planning phase is when you're producing these work breakdown structures. Okay, cool. So figure 3-3 on page 105 contains the work breakdown structures. And then, of course, the schedule. That's another thing you're going to have in the planning part. And that's figure 3-4 on page 106, which basically is this kind of stuff over again. This is the schedule shown as a Gantt chart. Cool. So now, not only do I know what it is I'm supposed to be doing, I can basically tell you how long it's going to take for this project to occur. Okay, good. And one of the other things that you might want to have in the planning process is a prioritized list of things that could go wrong. And I will tell you, the number one item on every single one of these lists is the same, okay? Trust me, I've done this before. And that is not getting enough information. That is number one on everyone's list every single time. You know, what are the potential things that can go wrong? People don't cooperate, don't tell me what it is I need. Don't provide me the information I need, and therefore when the project is done, it doesn't meet their requirements because they never told me what their requirements were. Yes. Lack of input from internal consultants. Lack of input from client representatives. Yes, number one. Security, okay, yeah, that could happen. Outsourcing, purchasing, outsourcing, purchasing, online, organizing, blah, 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 blah. Low on the risk factors is we're not going to accomplish our goal. We're not going to reap the benefits that we said we're going to reap. That's actually pretty low. But to tell you the honest to God truth, this is true of every single project I've ever done, is not having the right information up front. You don't want any surprises. You don't want to be 3/4 through the project and somebody says, well, what about this? And you go, geez, why didn't you tell me that a year ago? Okay, just telling you. All right, so the execution phase. So this is all focused on deliverables. Okay, it's time to produce whatever it is we're producing, in this case, a web page. We're going to put the web page together. Okay. It's focused on deliverables, but it also has document change requests. I'm going to go back to this guy. So during the execution part, we're gathering user input and we're doing all this good stuff and we're putting all this stuff together. We're probably going to find out that something where we went is wrong, and we're going to have to make some changes to it. So you need a built-in system of tracking. Now, in the software world, this is called bug tracking. Now, bug tracking isn't necessarily what you might think. Bug tracking doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong, you need to fix it. It also means feature tracking. So here's just another scenario. All right, you're working on something and you've got a list of features that you're supposed to build, but that was long ago, and you don't really pay much attention. And so when you're finally done, or you think you're done, someone says, well, hang on a second, let's check to make sure that we actually accomplished all the features we said we're going to accomplish. And so you bring up the list and you go, oh, dang, I missed one. So what you have to do is you need to have a tracking system for all the features and all the bugs. I'm going to have to get rid of this little squeaky cat. Can you guys hear that? So you need a way of tracking the assignment of every single bug or every single feature. If you don't assign it to a person, it probably isn't going to be done. For example, action verbs. You don't ever go say, the floor must be swept. You're right, I agree. That's a heck of a lot different than saying, Bob, you need to sweep the floor. So when you assign a task to a person, it's likely going to get done. If you just metaphorically state, by the way, the floor needs to be swept, well, then it may or may not get done. So, assigning it to an honest-to-God person is kind of sort of important. Okay, so table 3-11 on page 108 is basically talking about those things. So there's a milestone report. These things produce some documents or some things, some key dates along the way. Mainly because everyone has to report to somebody. So you're in the middle of doing a project. You need to be able to come up and say, okay, here's when we were supposed to have this done. Here's when we're supposed to have that done. And you produce these little reports and go in. If you look on table 311, starting on page 109, if you look at that, Erica kind of gets slammed there. I mean, Erica was saying, Erica's getting behind here and she's not providing what we needed. But again, I wouldn't put that in a written report, but nevertheless, milestone reports. This is also during the execution is when you discover that there's a budget error. Like, oh my goodness, this is going to take a heck of a lot more money or time than we anticipated. So, during the execution is when you alter that stuff. Typically, you might have a problem like you anticipated you were gonna survey your customers because you need to find out if you're going to get that 20% increase in customer satisfaction, but you get horribly low responses from your surveys, and you go, I only got 10 customers who responded, and that's not statistically significant, and we're never going to be able to monitor whether or not we were successful or not. Like, okay, that's when you're going to discover these things during the execution. Just as a note, whenever you're reporting, and this is just a general rule for all businesses, is don't suppress negative feedback. When something is going wrong, you don't want to hide it. You don't want to say, "Oh no, everything's fine. We're doing great. We're on time. We're on budget," and then find out later that the whole project is careening towards the abyss. So no, you need to say something is wrong. We had a vacation from key people, and we're way behind. Maybe I should borrow some people or something. Don't suppress the negative feedback. On page 111, they talk about the execution best practices. There's a pretty good list there. Their example is an urban revitalization project. I'm thinking that's pretty cool. You need to probably take a minute to read that. But it talks about all the things that could go well in a project rather than just necessarily going wrong. Okay, I'm going to continue. So monitoring and control, page 111. So 111, basically there's a table. Starts on 112, goes to 113. I'm going to let you read that on your own. That basically measures the progress towards your objective. Whatever your objectives are, they could be small individual objectives for each phase, or it could be the overall project objectives. So for example, I might have an objective that says, I wanted this to occur in 15 days, and I wanted that to occur in 20 days. Those are very specific objectives. And then the big one, of course, is, did I do what it is that it's supposed to do? Did I get the impact that I wanted to get? So measuring those things and then monitoring any deviation. For example, if I'm burning through my cash faster than I expected, I not only need to monitor that, I probably need to do something about it, right? Okay, cool. And we showed in Microsoft Project how you can freeze one of these schedules and then track actual against plan. That's kind of what we're talking about. To make sure you're not burning down faster than you're supposed to. One of the other things you would do in the monitoring and control, remember this occurs during the entire length of the project, is that project change requests, some sort of a tracking system that measures whether or not, keeps track of and measures all the things that you've made changes to. Because you may have started out with a set of specifications that are this big, and when you're done, the project is this big now. And so you need to be able to document how you got from that to that. Okay, this is how it's done. Okay, what most people do is a very short, like a weekly progress report. There's an example on page 113. I'll let you read that on your own as well, table 3-14. That talks about, here's what we've did. We've met this milestone. We're progressing with this. Or the next phase we're going to do is this, and we're anticipating that. Just a weekly report. Again, I mentioned kind of briefly in one of the previous videos about this thing called the visibility paradox, where you don't want to be too chatty, so to speak, where everyone every single day is reminded about your project, but maybe once a week they need to be reminded about your project. Okay. And then on page 114 is the project closing. And the project closing part is pretty straightforward, as you can probably imagine. I need to have some sort of customer acceptance. In this case, the customer is internal, so it's a little more complex. But something that basically says you're done. Because if you don't have a goal line on the field, how do you know when to stop? So yeah, you got to be able to have customer acceptance. Typically, that's also when you get paid if you're an outside consultant. Okay, so that's kind of important. Some sort of a final project report. And typically you would include in things like lessons learned, things that went well, things that did not go well. And you're trying to document all this stuff so the next time you do one of these projects that you have all that information at your hand. You can say, aha, we underestimated this phase, so we need to add more time the next time we do one of these. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark. So we'll pause this and pick it up again in just a few.